Hey, I'm Monica Wilbur. Education is my specialty, and let me tell you, I am really over the lies. Are you guys tired of the lies? Because I think at this point, they just must think we're like super stupid or something. But I heard a crazy lie last week, and since the truth matters, and we have an obligation to kind of speak out when we hear something that we know isn't right and that can deceive a lot of people. That's why I'm making this video today. Please bear with me for about 10 minutes. I swear it'll be worth your time. But let's find out what it was that prompted this video. I got a text from a friend yesterday, and she said, I heard from a friend that SEL was recently removed and that she heard this report came from Jennie Earl. So what is this referring to? Last week, the Utah State Board of Education voted to remove the definition of social and emotional learning from board rule. And this was based on a motion that was made by board member Jennie Earl. She's been there for like around 6 years, over 6 years now. And she claimed that social emotional learning does not exist in our documents, meaning the board's documents, and used that as the reasoning for deleting the definition of social emotional learning from board rule, which is crazy. Let's watch the video so you can see how this went down at the board.
The purpose of R277-100 is what?
But we use 100 for any definition that is used so often and so consistently.
I would like to strike social emotional learning from our Rule 100. We do not use it in our documents, and it's not repetitive. We do not use it in our documents, and it's not repetitive.
Yeah, the motion is to strike the definition for social and emotional learning. This passes 10 in favor, 4 in opposition. Those in opposition coming from Member Booth, Member Davis, Member Lear, and Member Reel.
The statement was made that social emotional learning should not be defined at the state board because it's not in any of the Utah State Board of Education's documents, and it's not repeated there or in rule. This is just the craziest statement on that I've heard in a long time. It's categorically false. It's easily disproven. I'm really shocked that somebody who's been on the board, not only as a board member but as board leadership, could make such a statement with a straight face. It's just so easily disprovable, as I'm going to show you right now. So let's look at how these are lies that we are being told. Social emotional learning, we see it at the state board in myriad documents. I only pulled a few examples. There are so many I could have pulled from. And here you can see for yourself with your own eyes. And this is social emotional learning at the USBE in the Castle CSI agreement that was entered in between Utah and Castle back in 2020. Castle stands for the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. This is a big workforce agreement we entered into with them. They've got the actual word social and emotional learning in their names. So yeah, we do social and emotional learning for sure. And here's this initiative, the Education to Workforce Pathways through SEL. So it is in our documents, and how we're going to connect education and workforce policy through an SEL lens. Here we have social emotional learning showing up in a USBE presentation to the House Education Caucus in 2020. It's the name of the presentation, social and emotional learning. And you can see right here, here are some examples from the presentation. I didn't show every page, but they make the statement that all learning is social and emotional, talk about social SEL integration, and most importantly about the state SEL framework. We have an entire state SEL education framework, and it is part of the state board strategic plan. They've formalized a working group to develop SEL. They're building a culture around SEL, common language, vision, infrastructure for implementation. We have social emotional learning showing up in Portrait of a Graduate. In fact, it's embedded in all the characteristics that show up in Portrait of a Graduate, workforce readiness, you name it. Here's another document, the USBE Mentors Best Practice and Practice Profile from 2021. And you can see that right here. And here's another document, Social Emotional Learning in USBE and the Roles of a Utah Teacher Leader in 2021. Here's a mention right here of social emotional learning. You can see it right there. So they talk about it. Here's another document where social emotional learning shows up in the USBE's high quality instructional cycle manual from 2021. And this is written for the local school districts. It shows up through every step of the instructional cycle. And there are 6 steps, and it's the 6th step. And they talk about social emotional learning just below equity. And so you can see that in each of the 6 steps right there. So social emotional learning is most definitely part of our documents. And these are not like small documents either. So here's another document. We have social emotional learning at the USBE in their social emotional learning technical assistance document, right in the name. They introduce it with the definition. They just got rid of, but it doesn't even matter, because if you look at the rest of the document, they talk about how, the USBE's definition of SEL is reflected in Utah's Portrait of a Graduate, which is the guiding vision for Utah's education system. So, they don't need it in board rule, the definition of SEL. They can just easily borrow a definition of SEL from Castle or any other myriad definitions floating out there on social emotional learning. We have social emotional learning in the USBE's PCBL framework document. This is from 2023. This is a huge deal. So if social emotional learning is steered by Portrait of a Graduate, PCBL is kind of the engine. Social emotional learning is a major, it's one of the essential components of Utah's PCBL framework. Here they talk about evidence-based practices related to social emotional learning. Here's another document, Social Emotional Learning in the USBE School Behavioral Toolkit of 2023. And boy, they mention social emotional learning a lot in this one in terms of needs assessment data, assessing students' mental health strengths, trauma, anxiety, and other mental health needs, increasing social and emotional skills for all students. And they go into great length. Please keep in mind that these are just a few examples from a few examples. Just didn't have the time to make this a 5-hour video. Here's another document, Social Emotional Learning in the USBE Formative Assessment Toolkit from 2023. Here we have Social Emotional Learning. The technical assistance document is referenced. Here we have another document, Social Emotional Learning in the USBE's Elementary College and Career Readiness Counseling Program Implementation Guide of 2023. That was a mouthful. And again, that Jennie Earl made the statement that SEL does not exist in our document. So we're just halfway through just a handful of documents, and you can see obviously that's just not the case. Here we have it mentioned here for social emotional development for each student. And again, systemic approach is what they want. And they talk about that systemic approach on this page. And here's another document, Social Emotional Learning in the USBE's Least Restrictive Behavioral Intervention Technical Assistance Manual 2023. All throughout it, they talk about social emotional learning. And here's, again, some of those examples in academic, social, and emotional learning. And so, mentioned here, mentioned there. Here you have the social emotional learning showing up in the USBE's engagement and attendance work study for 2024-2025 to solicit information about social emotional learning habits of students. We have social emotional learning that's mentioned in probably innumerable and unknowable emails at the USBE. Here's just one of them. It talks about SEL being a strategic plan priority. Here's another one. Hey, we've got a working committee on SEL. Purpose of our work is to develop a common language, etc., around social emotional learning. It goes on and on. There's just no end really to the number of documents. SEL is just deeply embedded into every part of the Utah State Board of Ed's strategic plan. It appears in one document after another, after another, after another, after another. So this statement that somehow social emotional learning does not exist in any of the documents, and so it's okay to just get rid of the definition in board rule is just ludicrous. I just kind of feel like that's a manipulation of perception. Probably the best thing if you want to get rid of SEL is start like digging at the roots and not slashing at the branches. But that's what's going on here by removing the definition. Feels like it's being whitewashed. So disappearing the definition of SEL does not disappear the ugly reality of SEL in schools. Again, I'm shocked, but I really shouldn't be at this point. I've been lied to so many times about what's going on in the schools that I take everything with a grain of salt. And when I know better for myself, I can't help but, point it out to others as well, because I feel like it's the only fair thing to do. Even if you were to get rid of the exact phrase social emotional learning, please know that there are so many euphemisms that are out there for it. We're talking dozens. Knowledge, skills, and dispositions is one of them. Competencies is another. Well-being is another. We need to live not by lies. I'm really disappointed that member Jennie Earl would make that statement and just kind of assume that it would be taken on face value. If you've been around the board for any amount of time, you know that that statement is simply not true. SEL is in myriad board documents. If you haven't been around for a while and you're a new board member and you kind of fell for whatever was told you to make you vote for that, like, hey, that's the first step to get rid of SEL, realize that the rationale given for it just didn't make any sense. It's simply not true. And how you get there matters. The truth matters. And I'm just going to finish up with this little video, this clip from Jordan Peterson, where he warns us about messing with reality.
I mean, one of the themes in my writing is the danger of falsehood. And at every level, it's like, well, if you tell the truth to the degree that you can, or at least don't lie, I think that's rule 8, then you have reality on your side. You got to decide, man. You want reality on your side, or do you want reality against you? Now, I wouldn't recommend the whole reality against you thing, because you're not going to win. You're going to get flattened.
All right, so get your kids to higher ground, and truth is part of that process.